Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here, and in particular to welcome Michael for the second of our fireside chat series around network effects businesses. I think Michael and I met a few years ago on some ski slope, actually. Got to know each other a little bit, and when we started doing this this series, I thought, what better person to talk about network effects than somebody who started a classified business online when people probably didn't even know that even existed, and there was no playbook to follow. And I guess Michael and his co-founder essentially invented it. So yeah, please join me in welcoming Michael.
Thank you.
It would be great if you could maybe start by just talking a little bit about how you got the idea to start GumTree and how it all started.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think to put things in context, I need to probably say what I was doing beforehand. So I was a bond trader in the city for 8 years, and it was in 8 years I particularly enjoyed. I traded Australian dollar bonds, and I got sent off to Hong Kong for 4 months, and then to Sydney for another year afterwards. This was back in 1996, so pretty pre to the internet. Obviously, in a very privileged situation, being sent from London down to another part of the world. We were all overpaid back in those days, very privileged, and I think it looked very glamorous to everyone else on the outside that you were doing this. But actually, in some ways, quite a lonely experience in that you'd go the other side of the world, not know anyone, and need to start a life again. And it's sort of a good reminder, I think, of how our social networks, in natural ones in life, of where you went to school and your first job, and people you grew up with, are all vitally important to us as as human beings. So anyway, went through that experience, made the best of it as I could. Came back to the London office, and I would see people coming from the Australian office, going through very much the same sort of thing. And then, anyway, went through that period. And I had 1 year working banking, which I particularly didn't like. I worked for a bank where the management was very bad, and I struggled to get out of bed in the morning, having been sort of one of the most enthusiastic people out there. It's funny how in life, when you're not driven towards something, suddenly you become sort of quite useless yourself. But anyway, so that was back in the heady days of 99, and there was a lot of news flow about this new thing called the internet. So I resigned from that job, thinking I might go back to banking, but at the same time I'm going to go and investigate what's going on in this new world. And is it indeed a new world, or is it a distraction? So I signed up for a local authority course at Kensington and Chelsea Council called Internet for Business. And so over a 10-week period, we studied every Friday for 8 hours, and I learned how to program very casually in HTML, and learned why database is important, how to buy domain names, and built a few sort of simple websites. And this increased my enthusiasm for what was going on, what you were seeing in the papers about this, I suppose, gold rush really that was going on, particularly in San Francisco at that time. And of course, I met some other people who were also interested in that world, and started to sort of put things together, and then started to make this connection really about my experience overseas. And I should say, actually, my business partner was a bond trader as well, and we were bond traders together. And Simon also worked in Hong Kong before me when I was in London office, and then he worked in Sydney as well. So actually, we'd both been through very much the same experience, and could empathise to seeing other people going through the same. And I think started to focus on the opportunity on the internet to connect people with similar needs, and got speaking with Simon about it, who was was particularly enthused about that also. And so we decided to move forward and build a network for Australians, New Zealanders, and South Africans based in London. I think there were about 1 million in the UK at the time, who all would it was a very sort of it was a community that travelled a lot, would come to London, would need somewhere to live, a job, a bicycle, and all those other things that classified advertising can can bring to you, and then may well leave the country and need to reverse that that process. So a real high need for connecting with other people, and particularly other people in that community. They would want to flat share with other Aussies, Kiwis, South Africans. They might seem like very different countries, but there was a very sort of strong Commonwealth connection amongst these countries. And so we decided to give it a go. Really, neither of us are or were technical people. We were business people with an idea. I think you could probably get away with a bit more in 99, 2000 than you can now. But we went out and we did it, and we gave it a go.
And you started in March 2000, you just mentioned, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, that's the Nasdaq peaked, I think, sometime in that month, which obviously you didn't know at the time. And did that kind of provide any lessons? Was that a good or a bad thing with hindsight? Did it even matter when the business started within a cycle?
Well, I mean, Simon and I were very fortunate in that we had saved some capital ourselves, which we invested into the business, and our plan was never to raise outside capital. We hadn't given that a lot of thought, but our plan wasn't to necessarily go and raise outside capital. Certainly, that gold rush that you'd been reading about in San Francisco came to a very abrupt halt, and I think it would have been a lot harder to raise capital. We were in the privileged situation that we didn't need to do it, even though the limited amount of money we had, we spent extremely well. I think one of the advantages coming out of launching at that time is that it was a nuclear winter really in the in the dot-com world. What had been a total bonanza had totally reversed, and that meant that it was very hard for anyone else to get hold of capital. So when you launch in a period like that, as long as you can survive yourself, you are likely to see less competition.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Michael is the worst advert for venture capital because he's never raised any himself. So it's quite an extraordinary story in that sense. But maybe coming back a little bit to that initial focus on the South African, Australian and New Zealand community, that was obviously very much a conscious choice that came out of your experiences. And when did it occur to you that you might have an opportunity to target a broader demographic, and when did that happen, and how long did it take you to really go after that?
I think it was obvious to us that there was a lot more value to be had in targeting a wider community than a niche community. And Simon and I sat down and many times and talked about pros and cons of different strategies. I think it's probably it's a lot harder to go after a mainstream strategy, on a mainstream strategy, particularly when you had limited capital, as we did. So we burnt through only, it seems laughable now, really. We burnt through around £270,000 before we became cash flow positive. That was on paying ourselves nothing over a number of years. And maybe it would have been very difficult with those sort of sums actually to have made good inroads into the more mainstream market. But of course, with all, I think, network businesses, when you've shown excellence in a small part of that, whether that's a geographical niche or a demographic niche, it does give you the benefit of being able to expand from that, because firstly, you've given yourself confidence as founders. Your employees have confidence. If you have shareholders, they've won confidence. Of course, your customers have won confidence in you. Right.
You mentioned before that you actually did attempt early on to broaden out and launched a kind of a parallel business called GumTree, I believe.
Yeah, so I can't remember the timing, but probably a year after launching GumTree, we launched a site called chilitree.com, which was targeted at the more mainstream, I guess, young professional community in London. And we managed to get that going. We managed to get content on there and make it a reasonable user experience. We failed to get the same viral marketing that we got from the community in GumTree, and I'm not 100% sure why that is. It may well be that it was our second idea and we were putting all our focus into GumTree. That doesn't tell me that if we'd just gone for that community initially that we would have succeeded or failed. I think it's very hard to tell from that, but we just didn't get the natural growth out of that we would wanted to have had.
Right. You mentioned competition or the lack thereof, or maybe the fact that some of them didn't react to you essentially entering the market early on. Can you maybe remind us all a little bit of what competition even looked like in that segment, both in the initial demographic focus of yours, but then also more broadly in the general classified sector?
Sure. So back in 2000, really, the challenge was different to what many of you will face now, in that we weren't trying to win internet users. We were trying to convert people from the offline world to the online world. And I think being one of the earlier UK businesses, you were all doing that to some extent. So really, there was very little online competition, and it was generally the traditional publishers. So Evening Standard, the Daily Mail Group, and magazines that were your competition. In fact, I think Rupert Murdoch referred to classifieds as his rivers of gold back in the 80s and 90s. But that was, of course, going to change for the for the newspaper world, and we were very fortunate with our timing that we were one of the first people out there trying to provide a better solution to consumers, because of course the internet is a much better medium for classified advertising than the newspapers and magazines were. In the old days, if you were advertising a flat share for sale, you'd be talking about DBLRM as a double room, because you either had to pay or you were limited by space. And of course, the internet changed all that. You could delete adverts when you'd sold a car. You could change the price on a car when you had or if you weren't selling it. So it was I think our timing was very fortuitous. But the competition all came from the offline world.
Right. Did any of them attempt online at all in those very early days?
I think there were various levels of attempts to take things online. I think it was very difficult for the people who run these businesses that had very good revenues from classified advertising. Some of you won't remember, it was all on the back of the newspaper and the back of the magazines, and these were great annuity streams for these publications. And I think it was very hard sitting there, probably in a boardroom, saying, should we offer a free website? Should we offer a website which competes with what we're doing already? And a lot of them, the majority either didn't compete or they did it very badly. One of the few, in my mind, one of the few exceptions was Auto Trader, who I think got it. But I think it'd be fair to say that a lot of the old media were inept. And really didn't understand this new world, and that was very fortuitous for us, in that it gave us a number of years to make a headway on not a great deal of money.
Right.
And I think, quite frankly, if they had not been so inept, we wouldn't be sitting and having this conversation today, and GumTree probably wouldn't exist.
You mentioned some of the needs, I guess, that you covered early on: jobs, flat shares or flats, place to live, bicycle. Were there particular categories that took off more rapidly than others?
There was a lot of liquidity in the accommodation sections, naturally, I think, because of the nature of the community, and that it was quite a sort of backpacker-driven community. There was a Kiwi West African community at that stage, and the culture generally was to share houses. So we got very strong liquidity in that very quickly, and then other sections such as jobs were much harder. So I remember being off meetings at lots of different employers, from Oddbins to Price Waterhouse, and actually even trying to sell something for free to someone like that, or even probably paid, is very, very difficult. And took a lot more work. But of course, actually, at the same time, there's a lot of value in bringing in the corporates or the employers, because they can be a very good source of future revenue for a business. So we recognise that. So while we started out probably with a sales in which I was the first salesperson, I guess, focusing on the community side of the the sections, as soon as that started to grow, we soon changed our attention over to the sections which we felt that could provide revenue that were hard, which were harder sales.
Right. Talking about revenue monetization, I guess one of the typical challenges in these businesses is always when and how to monetize. Can you walk us through a little bit of how that happened at GumTree?
Sure. I mean, really, I mean, a lot of what we did was, stick your finger in the air and have a guess, and just use our intuition, because there wasn't really a model out there for, what we should be doing. So we started monetizing after 3 years, which was very successful. But we had hoped to do it much earlier than that, and I think we could have monetized earlier than that, but we would have killed the growth in what we were doing. And of course, growth in a marketplace business is essential. So we spoke to our customers after 6-9 months, and we felt from those conversations we could tell that we'd not created enough value yet in order to be able to charge people. So we decided to leave it. We went back to those same customers after 2.5, 3 years and asked them the same questions, and I think they gave us the same answers, that we probably wouldn't be able to monetize it. They wouldn't be prepared to pay. But it was obvious to us at that stage the value that we were creating for people. You can just if you're close to your business, you can feel the quantity of the value that you're providing. So I think it's important to ask your customers for their views, but I would never slavishly listen to them, because they will mislead you at times. And we started charging. I think we just started charging. I think it was nanny jobs after 3 years, with an intention to rolling it out to other job sections. And it was very successful. It was obvious by that stage that we had created a cash cow. But of course, after 3 years of pain and darkness, really, it's great when you look back at these businesses and you see that where they've got to now. But let's not forget, there are times when you're sitting there and you thought, well, we can't charge now, but there is no one telling you you'll be able to do it in 2.5, 3 years' time. It's all you know is we can't do it now, and maybe we can do it at some stage in the future. And that does challenge your personal psychology at times. It's quite dark and dark and difficult, and you keep plugging away and you keep doing the right thing. And we were fortunate that strong competition didn't come into our marketplace. Someone could have easily come in with 5 million, 10 million, 100 million into your marketplace. They may never make a return out of that money, but they will make life very difficult for you and potentially close you down. So I think luck's a very important part in business. It's not that you've been necessarily lucky to where you've got to, and you keep doing the right things, and it's essential that you keep doing the right things. But luck is a part of it, and that someone hasn't come in and made your life very difficult.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's fascinating that you obviously didn't have the confidence from looking at other businesses who had followed essentially the same path as you, knowing that at the end of the tunnel there was going to be a lot of light in the form of easily monetizable business. You kind of had to take it on trust, and I guess just good business sense fundamentally. But if you look back at those first 3 years and those dark moments, were there any kind of moments when you also felt like this is never going to work? And what were they characterized by, these moments? Or what were the kind of the darkest of the dark moments?
Gosh, we're going deep.
I'm taking you back to
Feels like counselling. I think I do.
Part of the service we offer at Piton Capital.
It is, it's very difficult when you're there, and I think, I was, very lucky in that, having a great business partner, and I think when things are difficult, having the more than one of you, firstly making decisions, and secondly to bounce things off. Simon's, strategically excellent and, very stable, and I'm sort of a bit more emotionally up and down about, these things. So, when I was maybe feeling a bit low about something, Simon would point out, what we're building and the, how much people like using the service and, these little things. And, it's difficult and it's dark and, there's no one, your friends are around you, they haven't given up their jobs and, they're all earning good money and doing better. And, and people, you hear people saying, he's gone to do this. Why is he doing this? And I don't think anyone was saying to us, actually, it's great what you're doing. None of our friends were saying it's great what you're doing and you're onto something good. This never happened.
Right.
So it is you're on your own. You're on your own as a founder. But I think having that that co-founder is can be extremely useful. Certainly if you're going through some sort of challenging times.
Sure, absolutely. Were there challenging times business-wise? I mean, you mentioned competition really wasn't much of a factor, but were there moments when there were maybe people abusing the site, which is clearly something that certainly happened later on in Classified, where they tried to defraud other users, or were there kind of moments when you said, what am I doing here? What's happened here?
I think we had all the normal tests and DDoS attacks and frauds coming from a couple of countries, but yeah, you have to deal with that stuff. And we had times where our technology wasn't good enough, and it would let us down. But I think that's probably pretty normal running a business, and you are going to have problems, and you just deal with them. And we were pretty good at making decisions. We made very sensible decisions, and I don't think we made any large mistakes with what we were doing. So these things come along and they test you, and you do the right thing. And I probably didn't even know what a DDoS attack was when it came out. So you learn a lot, and you deal with it. So I don't we never had any real problems in the business. We never had any sort of red flags. We generally made pretty good decisions most of the time, and that will hold you in good stead.
Sure. I guess one of the things that's certainly become a feature of these businesses is kind of moderation of content at scale. Is that something that you did from the early days at GumTree as well, that you actually kind of went through the ads either with technology or manually to make sure that what was uploaded was appropriate? So we would go through everything manually, and of course we would use technology to make that a slightly smoother process. Through the years, as you obviously get more and more adverts coming through. I think it's essentially important with a new business that is a marketplace to manually check your content. You have to be in the business of offering excellence to people, and people, when they go and click on Peugeot bicycles for sale, don't want to see Peugeot cars for sale or I can mend your bike, whatever it is. So in those very early stages, I think human moderation is very, very important. It's very important for business owners and staff to understand the user experience and know what content is on the site. We'd spend a lot of time going over the site as users. It's very easy sometimes just to look at a site through your back end admin tools, but actually there's nothing better than looking through your site as a user and seeing what they are what they are experiencing. So yeah, we started out with a very manual process. So I mean, in the early days, we had to check the adverts. So I'd literally be on Christmas Day checking adverts, and Simon the same. And weekends, and actually we felt a bit mean tasking the staff to check the adverts at weekends. So often, we'd be checking thousands of adverts on a Saturday afternoon. But quality was very, very important to us, and I think some of the competitors around didn't understand that, and you can fail on the back of not providing enough quality. For sure, yeah. When did you make that decision to open up the site to the general population from your initial focus? Was there a particular metric that you were focused on before you did so, or was there another kind of aha moment? I don't think there was a specific metric. We naturally found that other nationalities were starting to want to use the site. A lot of Polish people were using the job site, for example. I mean, we were providing, in our mind, an excellent solution, and there weren't many excellent solutions around. So actually, people would gravitate
to use it. It was, actually, to be fair, it was more Simon's pressing really that we decided to take sort of positive action into assisting the site to go more general. So initially we had a banner on the site saying London's online community for Aussies, Kiwis and Africans. But under Simon's Simon's idea to sort of change that to, I think, London's online community. I think I argued it for sort of 3 days, not because I disagree with him, but I was nervous about moving away from a niche that we, create a lot of value in. And, in business and in marketplaces, you don't want to become, there's no point trying to cover everyone and doing it badly. You've got to operate in an area of excellence, whatever that area is. So I was nervous about taking it wider, but I think I just wanted to test. Simon believed in it strongly enough, so I sort of kept him going for 2-3 days, and sort of acquiesced that we should give it a go, and he was right. There's obviously a lot more value in broader classifieds than there are in just targeting a niche, and I think the competition and the options for the more general London community were pretty weak, and that's that stage. So it was fairly easy to mop up that demand that was out there.
Right. Was obviously the direct classified competition sounds like it was very weak at that point still. Were you at all looking at kind of substitute offerings? I'm thinking the auction sites, eBay in particular, at that point. Were they a factor as competitors for at least parts of your offering?
I'd say, as we went on, most of the competition came from verticals. So an auction site is it comes from the buy and sell vertical. So they were, after a few years, there were some people who had very good job sites. There were people, eBay, etc., operating in the buy and sell. So there were a lot of there were a lot of competitors in the different verticals, and some of them did it very well. What we found with general classifieds is that, particularly as we were converting people from offline users to online users, that if you'd offered them excellence in one area, let's say you come to London and you found a flat share, you may never dream of using a job website. But when you see the word accountancy jobs there, and you're looking for an accountancy job in London, you go, this site has delivered for me on accommodation, and it's I trust this site. It's very hard not to press that button. So all the job sites were spending a lot of money on winning or acquiring customers, but we didn't have to do that because, firstly, we were converting people in the easy win sort of accommodation sections to the internet, and then we'd convert them from that into buy and sell or jobs or dating and other parts of the big six. It's definitely one of the advantages of general classifieds is that you can it's much easier to move people across verticals once you've won their trust. Right.
So maybe kind of before we dig a little bit into those deep six or those big six, what about kind of winning them in the first place? Did you spend any money on marketing? I mean, out of your £270,000 total burn budget to cash flow break even, how much of that was spent on user acquisition?
Good question. So we did a little bit of advertising at the beginnings. Obviously, you've got zero brand at the beginning, and you need to bring some customers in. So we used to buy adverts in the Metro newspaper, which was obviously it still is a free morning publication. So at that stage, most people didn't have internet at home, and I think no one had internet on the phone. So the obvious places were sort of the Evening Standard and Metro newspaper. But we found that people going to work in the morning where they had an internet connection was our best chance of converting them from a newspaper advert. If you advertise in the evening, so pick up the Evening Standard, people would either have to remember what they wanted to do or they'd have to tear it out and then either get back home and this is the day of dial-up modems. and dial up, or they'd have to take it to work the next day. And so we found that sort of, I don't know, call to action or that moment of action of advertising before people were about to get internet access was, was very important for us. And that worked pretty well. And of course, I don't think, in the history of the UK, there'd ever been an advert in a paper like, Metro or the Evening Standard targeting Aussies, Kiwi South Africans in London. So, if you saw that, it was probably quite hard to ignore it and think,
Right.
I'm not going to look at that. So we did a little bit of that. When we first started, I think we only did about 5 or 6 adverts in the Metro newspaper. It was about every 2 weeks, and we get a spike because of it, and then it would die down, and then you get a bigger spike, 2 weeks later. We did a little bit there were some internet cafes called Easy Everything, which I think Stelios set up. And a lot of, because there was no, people didn't really have internet connections at home. A lot of people go to internet cafes back in 2000 for access. A lot of Aussies, Kiwi, South Africans used to go there. So we paid for some banners in there, and then we used to put some, and then we paid for posters in the bathrooms in well-known Aussie, Kiwi, South African establishments around UK. So they were generally sort of based in, Acton and Willesden and places like that. So we a lot of that was offline, obviously, to attract people. Going on from that, I think, of course, Google AdWords didn't exist back in 2000. What we did do is that we felt that, certainly with a limited budget, that search engine optimization was an area of interest and valuable. And I went and sort of made myself a self-learnt, I suppose, expert really in SEO, and then really use really sort of deep thinking through that process, because actually we had a website with a lot of content that we weren't using, because of course when you get developers to build websites, none of them think about SEO, and I think very few nowadays even think about SEO. They'll build you what you ask for, but most people aren't asking for how to bring traffic in. They just how can you view an advert, how can you post an advert. So we went and pretty much changed the whole structure of the site around sort of deep SEO thinking, and went really, really deep into this, and it was transformational. So we get 30,000. Suddenly we've got 30,000 people a day coming from Google, because all our customers are placing unique content about a used Scott mounted by 18 gears Clapham for sale. So suddenly, if you went on on the internet and you go searching, Scott used mountain bikes or whatever it was, I mean, we were dominating the first page of, first page of Google. And I think that was pretty transformational for us with very little money.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. How local actually were those ads? I mean, presumably there was text that said Clapham's bike. Was that something that you actively made use of, and you tried to show people content nearby, as in hyper-local at that point, which is obviously, as you said, pre-mobile, probably pre-Google Maps? Was that relevant to the growth?
We would allow people to search on hyper-local. Only rather than sort of create pages with it, but we would, that field called location, which generally people fill out as Clapham or which other London suburbs, we would make huge use of in our SEO. So just things like your URL structure, your page titles, actually pretty simple stuff, but no one was doing it, and we weren't doing it when we first started. We would make huge use of that. And we spent a lot of time actually setting up categories in in an SEO friendly way. And it was game changing. I think it brought in a lot, super amount of traffic. And I think actually it's an area still that people don't take advantage of enough. They get developers to build websites, and developers will give you what you ask for. But very few of them understand SEO, and very few agencies understand SEO. And agencies aren't, their incentive is not to tell you how to build your sites. Their incentive is to sell you, Google AdWords or something that is a revenue stream every month, so that they can take a cut out of it. So I think everyone probably thinks they understand SEO, but I've met very few people who I think actually generally have really got to the bottom of what it's about.
Right. Fascinating. So coming back to the big six of classifieds, without kind of enumerating them, was there any one category that you felt you didn't do so well in, and is that because competition did a better job there, or did you feel actually you covered them all very well?
I think there were probably, if I go down sort of deeper than that, there were probably some job sections which we were less successful in, either because other people were doing it well, or because maybe the community we were covering were less prolific in those those sort of sections. I mean, obviously in the early days, targeting Aussies, Kiwis, and Africans, things like bar jobs and restaurant jobs, which were very much staffed in those days by those nationalities, we were super powerful in. But I think as you probably also sometimes you go higher up the business hierarchy, and you need a particular type of accountant, for example, we would be less less strong at that.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Any kind of killer category outside of jobs that you felt early on it was just working? I mean, was dating, for example, a big part of it?
I mean, dating was pretty popular. But I think the killer ones really are, accommodation is probably the main killer.
Right.
The main killer category that it was very hard for people to go elsewhere, at that stage, and drove a lot of traffic to other parts of the site.
Yeah, can imagine. Fantastic. So yeah, we talked about the fact that you never raised external capital for GumTree or for your subsequent business, which we'll talk about a bit. But then you decided, I guess, in 2005 to sell the business to eBay. So it'd be great to hear a little bit how that came about, how they approached you, how you ultimately made your decision to sell.
So we weren't looking to sell. I don't know, I think I received an email or a telephone call, I can't remember, from one of the staff at eBay London who had said they'd like to meet up. So of course that creates conversations at our end. Why do they want to meet up? And what's going on? So of course you realise they sort of see you as an opportunity or a threat. You're concerned that they might just want to milk you information, and that's it. But so we didn't know why they wanted to meet, but they wanted to meet up. So I don't know, I guess a few weeks later we met up with them, and then Doug McCallum, the CEO, general manager of eBay UK, came along with a couple of other people and basically said they'd been watching us and love what we were doing, and would be interested in talking about making an investment in the business. They didn't say at that stage they were interested in buying us outright. So and then we decided to entertain their thoughts and see where we got to. So over a matter of probably 6 months, we sort of got to know them a little bit better. They were also being quite inquisitive in classifieds. I can't remember when that information came out in Europe and the States. So I think we started to get a bit more comfort that what they might be trying to achieve. And over a number of months, we shared some data with them. They sent over one of their corporate financiers from San Francisco, came to our London office for a week or so, and made us an offer, and we didn't come to any agreement. And they said, will you come over to San Francisco? So Simon and I went over, and I think we were sort of in a windowless room for the best part of a week, sort of in discussions with them. And at the end of that week, we came to an agreement for them to to buy the business. So and as it turned out, they had taken a view, I think globally, that classifieds was an interesting market for them, and obviously very close to to the auction models, and they were having multiple conversations around the world with different people who they felt were leaders in classifieds.
Right. Absolutely. Did you stick around when after the acquisition?
Not for that long. So in the negotiations, Simon and I agreed that we would do a joint venture with eBay in Russia and Eastern Europe. So eBay we're told 19.9% of the business, and because they wanted us obviously to go and do that and win those territories, it was fairly easy for us to. I think we hung around for 3 months or something like that, and then we had 1 month off only, and then we started on the new business,
which was called Zalando.
Yes.
So tell us about that. Was that was a plan then that you already developed while you were talking to eBay about selling GumTree?
Yeah. So Zalando was a GumTree style business in Russia and Eastern Europe. We operated it from London. We employed people from those countries, the countries that we were operating with. I think we branded it down at Stratford Shopping Centre. So we were trying to find a brand name that had 2 syllables and would work in multiple countries in Russia and Eastern Europe. Our options, I think, were an English brand name, a Russian brand name, or to make up a word. But we found out as we went that a lot of the old Eastern Bloc wouldn't be very happy using a Russian word. A lot of the English brand names we wanted to buy them in multiple jurisdictions.
Right.
CZ, SK, etc. So we decided to go down the route of creating a brand. So we wanted a 2-syllable brand name. So Simon and I and a couple of Russian and Eastern Europeans we literally went through syllables we like to start a brand name with and syllables we like to end. We created a spreadsheet that you'd put in 25 of each and you'd end up with, what's 25 squared, I'm not sure, hundreds of thousands of names, and we'd go through them. And then I had a Russian girl who said that she could spot a Russian at 100 meters. So we used to go down to Stratford Shopping Centre with her, and she'd spot someone and she'd say, they're Russian. and off we would go and explain to them what the business we were trying to create. And we'd show them 3 or 4 brand names. Right. And we'd say, could you rank these brand names between 0 and 10? So the people would do that. And it was, it was great. It's great fun. It's probably the most fun of running a business is actually branding it. But we came up with Zalando, Slando.
Fantastic. So that scored high on the 1 to 10 scale.
It did.
With
it took multiple
Russians in Stratford Shopping Centre.
Yeah, Russians and Eastern Europeans. We wanted to get a balance across the geographies, but it took multiple iterations of multiple visits of spotting Russians down at Stratford Shopping Centre to get to the end point. Because we'd drop a few names out and go back with the 2 that scored best in the last round, and maybe with a few new ideas, until we were happy with what we'd come up with.
Fantastic. Beats, I guess, employing a branding agency for £50,000.
Sure, and I've seen multiple examples of people doing that, and the results not being very good. So I think it's fantastically enjoyable branding a business, and it's very important to get close to your users to do it well. And I think there's probably no one probably better than doing it than the management team.
What else did you do differently second time around?
Well, we spent a lot more money than we spent on GumTree.
How much more?
I think it was about. I think we ended up spending about $5 million. By that stage, Google AdWords was obviously, had been created and is like rocket fuel for any business. But of course, you can spend an inordinate amount of money on it as well, which is one of its downsides. But we wanted to accelerate, the process faster. As we had done in GumTree. So in GumTree, we were in 10 different countries and multiple different languages, and we obviously operated in the local languages. across Russia and Eastern Europe. So I'm trying to think what else we did different. Probably not much else than spending more money.
Just trying to get growth faster.
Yeah, to get growth faster. You've got a limited. I mean, with any business, there's a limited window really of success. Maybe with GumTree it was 3 years, and we took advantage of that. And obviously, as markets mature and people see eBay buying classified businesses, that was a big marker in sort of 2005. Really, as they bought multiple businesses, that suddenly people who had never been interested in classifieds suddenly became very interested, and there was a lot more investment going into that world. So you had to, and of course it's the same for. I think a lot of new businesses now is that you'd be very lucky to go and spend 250 to 500,000 pounds and get to success, because someone else out there can outspend you so much quicker,
right,
through the rocket fuel of Google AdWords, which is genius / evil at the same time. That you need lot larger amounts now than we got away with in 2000.
Sure. So what happened to Zalando?
So we sold Zalando to Naspers of South Africa in 2012. So we were the number one player in Ukraine. We hadn't got to number one in Russia, which was unfortunate. But I think we hadn't spent enough money, ironically, or to take that market, and we were outspent in Russia, to credit to the competitors that did that. So maybe you were saying earlier, Heather, we didn't take venture capital money. Maybe the final lesson, Andrin, is that we should all come to Piton Capital.
Exactly. It was nicely set up. It took us 45 minutes to get to this point. Exactly. It was all just kind of leading up to this. Interestingly, actually, we have somebody from Avito in the audience today, or is just finishing at Avito, so which is, I guess, one of the Russian businesses that ultimately spent the money to really consolidate the leadership position, and ironically, in the end, sold to Naspers as well.
Exactly. Yeah, they've also been very acquisitive in the space, like eBay.
Exactly. Yeah. It sounds like that whole industry has really consolidated around 3 players: eBay, Naspers, and I guess Schibsted being the third. So it's interesting how, from within 18 years since you started. That everybody's now recognizing the power of those businesses, and it has very much consolidated globally.
And it's interesting how under the radar classifieds were. I mean, no one was, back in 2001, it wasn't sexy. No one was interested in classifieds. Many other areas they were, but I don't know why. Particularly when I go back again to Rupert Murdoch, talking about being his rivers of gold. You'd think it would be a sort of natural target, but didn't. It seemed to be under the radar, which is a wonderful place to launch any business. Is when there's not a focus. Actually, interesting, when we decided to launch a business in Russia and Eastern Europe in 2005, all the focus at that stage was on China. Meg Whitman was going to spend 3 or 6 months there apparently, and a lot of the investment money was going there. And we felt it was important to again go where people weren't interested at the time. I think probably, if you're looking to launch a business and everyone's talking about that sector already, you're probably, you're pretty late to the party, and you're going to have to be particularly smart or particularly good to, to win that area. And there's a small window where you can make some progress with less interest from the people around you who might upset the apple cart.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, no, we are big fans of operating in stealth until you have sufficient power to really make a difference. Now, obviously, since you then sold Zalando to Naspers, you've also become an angel investor. And if you kind of look at the businesses that you've invested in, are there particular pearls of wisdom that you pass on, or particular things that you kind of look out for, given your own experience as an entrepreneur?
I guess I'm looking for what appear to be strong founders, something different about them, and then a business which to me feels feasible. Often, so generally I'm investing as the first money in stage, so there's no data, maybe one customer, maybe more likely zero customers. So a lot of it, I think, is intuition based, and trying to feel, whether there's a business in what someone's suggesting, and then, do you think the people are backable?
Makes sense. I do want to open this up to the audience as well, so I'd love to see whether people here have questions for Michael. I think we have a microphone that's probably going to get passed around. We had one question at the front here, or towards the front. Well, there's quite a few, so let's start up here.
Hey, Bertie from my tutor. You talked a bit about converting customers to online, and we still have people who book an online tutorial and buy that online tutor across all. Were there any, other than the sort of categories like accommodation, which was naturally people shared, were there any different strategies employed for the categories which were less viral by nature? You mentioned sales, but were there any particular strategies or effective marketing strategies that helped drive adoption in those categories?
So the other end of the scale from accommodation is probably the jobs. So employers have many more processes, corporates have many more processes, are harder to sell to, slower moving. So they need a different focus. So one would need to go and approach those people and meet them. I think corporates are particularly concerned about what they're dealing with. They've got reputation at stake. So selling something to them sometimes at a better value than what they do already is less relevant. So you need to go and spend time and meet them. Certainly in the early stages. I mean, obviously with all marketplaces, after you've built traction, you will create viral marketing even in these harder sections, and obviously there's no better marketing than that. But in the early days, and I think with a difficult section like jobs, it's continuous. I'm sure all the vertical job sites have very large sales teams, but you need to keep the pressure on those on those sections.
Thank you. My question is a bit more specific on the classified space, I guess. But I guess one of the issues which a lot of the classified companies are now looking at is the entry of sort of like the Facebooks and the Amazons into that space. So how do you think about the competition from those guys and how that might impact the sort of incumbents? And in general, how do I guess sort of startups think about the threat of all of these tech giants entering their space, and because they have massive resources, and I mean maybe it's not very difficult for them to come in and disrupt these businesses. So how do you think about that risk as a founder, and specifically for classifieds?
That risk obviously exists, and it's very difficult to change the behaviour of third parties. So all you can really do is manage your own business and your own behaviour. So I think the key is to keep offering excellence in what you do. Keep thinking about the user experience. I mean, historically, it's been very tough to knock an incumbent out of a classified space, and the incumbent would often need to be doing something particularly wrong for that to happen. And of course, we saw that with the newspapers. They didn't embrace the internet, so that was their moment. Obviously, technology will keep developing. So mobile is one area, and there will be some classified sites that will fail on not embracing things like mobile and AI. It's not the first time that some of the largest players in the world have tried to embrace classifieds. Google did it 10, 15 years ago now with Google Base, which didn't work. But of course, we all feared it, and we were all very scared. And it's right that you are fearful. But actually, their lack of human touch and just trying to use algorithms to provide solutions was really their downfall. And that may well be the downfall of other large players who are trying to operate in classifieds now. But at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about that. So all you can do is run your business and run your business well, and keep thinking about your customer and what do you need to do better. there is no use in doing anything, spending much time in doing anything different.
Great. If I have a sort of a two-part question. The first, comparing yourselves with Craigslist, how do you position that if you were imagining it going forward? Because you could have gone, I suppose, country to country and then dove into major city markets and come across a Craigslist later on. Was that a consideration, and was it because you didn't have a venture backing that you didn't do it, or was the ambition just to be great in one place and that would be sufficient? That would be great.
So we took GumTree to 10 different countries. And so when we started out, Craigslist was in San Francisco only, and then did start to reach out from San Francisco, but certainly in a lot of foreign language countries only operated in English. And we went into Poland, and obviously in Polish, and France and French, and we were about to launch in Germany, obviously in German. So I mean, Craigslist is obviously a fantastic resource and fantastic business. But certainly, I haven't looked recently, but certainly has been doing things quite differently in a lot of countries outside the States. Actually, I mean, they came to London. I can't remember 2003 to 2004, but the site was still Americanized. They launched an Americanized site in the UK. So I think cars were called autos, and lorries were called trucks, and flat shares, we call it in the UK, was called room share, which is probably pretty confusing for any Brit what you're getting yourself into. But and of course it's scary when someone who's very powerful in another country comes to your area. But maybe going back to the last person's question, you just got to keep doing what you do and keep doing it well, and thinking about your customers, and hope that the people who come into your marketplace make mistakes, yeah.
Hi, I'm Gemma from Settled. Thank you. It's really, really interesting to hear all of this. My question was, given your ability to kind of jump ship from your early career when you spotted the opportunity that the internet had to offer, how are you feeling now about upcoming technologies, the obvious buzzword being blockchain, and how do you think that will play out over the next decade?
Business and services to consumers keep iterating and keep changing. Obviously, HTML coming out in sort of in the mid '90s, and Web 1.0, which is what we launched into, was one of those iterations. The telephone was one of the iterations before that, and a business like Direct Line took advantage of that. And there are going to be many more iterations that come along. Mobiles being one of them, and blockchain is another one. So I mean, the great thing about it is that the opportunities keep rolling. So all these businesses really, nothing that any of us do is overly new. We just take sort of layers and we apply them. So we took Web 1.0 and we applied it to classifieds. Other people are applying GPS and mapping and to problems. So every time something comes out, there are all these old layers which you can, or these old business sections which there's going to be changing. So you can take blockchain to many different areas, and there will be something after blockchain as well. And these businesses such as GumTree need to keep iterating and changing and take advantage of of the tech as it changes. And not all will do that, and some will die. But it's great opportunities for you in this room to launch businesses with new technologies or apply them to old problems. And it would appear every sort of 5 years or so there are new opportunities appearing. And of course we'll be reading in 5 years' time of people who've used blockchain to solve consumer problems and business problems, and they'll have done very well out of it.
Hi, I'm James from Encore. You mentioned you'd met very few people who really understood SEO. What do you think the experts do understand that everyone else doesn't understand? And are there fundamentals that you learned, decades ago that still apply today when thinking about SEO from a marketplace point of view?
So I spend a lot less time now on learning about SEO than I used to. So it's quite possible that some of my skills have become a little bit rusty. But I talk to and coach some businesses I've invested in on SEO, and I don't feel that things have changed that much. The word expert generally scares me, particularly when someone tells you an expert. It's sort of I don't know. It can scare me a lot, in that I think there's a lot of people who are experts in various different areas that actually aren't as skilled, as knowledgeable as you need them to be. And if you're running a business, I think you need to pick up some of the skills in some of these areas. You don't need to become the expert yourself, but you can't just rely on hiring experts to solve your problems for you. You need to build up a base of knowledge in whatever they are, the 10, 20 different areas which are important in running a business, because I think only then can you recognize who actually may be an expert on, or what is needed for your business. So I guess, to create an analogy, if you want to build a house, you're going to build a lot better house when you understand how electrics and wiring and plumbing and flooring works. Whereas if you just go to experts and say, I want a house, but you don't really understand any of the different aspects of drainage or anything like that, you'll probably find some things might get very wrong, and you might get a house with a damp-proof course or something like that. So I think actually to understand those building blocks, and SEO is one of those building blocks, and one I think that a lot of people don't spend any time in getting familiar with. It's time very well spent.
So following on from that, you went from 2 people in a room to working with eBay. You must have gone through massive differences in the people you employed and the culture of the business as you went through that. Can you just take us through some of those stages?
Yeah, I mean, when we started out in this business, there weren't, we were hiring people without internet skills. Certainly for the non-technical jobs, so for marketing, etc. I mean, there wasn't a playbook, and people only really started, I guess, investing in .com business, and maybe in 97 or so. I think it was around then that lastminute.com launched. So we would generally hire people who had no experience, but in some ways I think that helped us, because we really understood the user experience, and we put a lot of time into that and understanding it. And I think a lot of running a business is not rocket science. It's pretty simple stuff, but you've got to get that right. So yeah, I learned on the job myself. I knew nothing about the internet before I started, and none of us did really. So we sort of made it up, and we're just intuitive and just learned as we go. Yeah, as obviously as you go along and you mature, you start to hire, and the ecosystem evolves. You start to hire people with more experience. But I think that the skills that we had built up through learning about different areas would help you to hire better people. And actually, going back to those building blocks of knowledge that I think a sort of CEO should have, actually, you hire better people when you understand some of these building blocks. So, if I'd sit down and talk to someone about marketing, I might not make it clear to them that SEO is an area I understand a lot about, and maybe paid search I'm weaker at. But actually, by hearing what they'd say about different areas, I can probably pick out, I can pick out that they are very strong in SEO, or they're very weak, and they'll, if they're going to try and pull one over you and say that they're very strong at paid and SEO, you can probably tell they're weak at one, and they're therefore probably going to be weak at some. Weak at another. So yeah, I don't know. Our skills, evolved over the years, and that helps you to hire people better as the ecosystem started to expand.
Shib from Juno. I probably should start by saying thank you. I am one of those Aussies that moved over from Sydney 2006, found my first flat on GumTree in West London. My question was around when you talked about moving to 10 other countries. Did you do that, or was part of the strategy in-house from London, or did you hire people within those countries to help expand?
So we ran the whole business from London. So the first 3 countries we went to outside the UK were, probably no surprise, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. So we launched those from the UK. So probably broke all privacy rules, and we would, if anyone had an email address ending in .com.au who'd used our service in the past, or using it presently, they would get an email. We wouldn't, wouldn't know if they were in London or maybe back in Australia, another country, but we emailed everyone and would tell them we've launched a site in, I think, Sydney and Melbourne. Please use it, or tell folks back home to use it. And we do a little bit of local advertising, but we wouldn't staff it on the ground. It was a more, cost-effective solution. Again, I went through earlier that we didn't spend a lot of money in our, in our evolution. So, in that 270,000, we're running business in 10 countries. So we would sell, we had, German, French, Polish people working in the London office, but we wouldn't staff it. And I think, you need a much bigger infrastructure and management infrastructure office infrastructure to start putting people, locally in those countries. But it's a great way of starting to make some progress in those countries. Obviously, there comes a stage where you want to put infrastructure in those countries. But, back in those days, when, again, classifieds was under the radar, we felt it was a reasonable strategy to, to operate that way. And, GumTree's been very successful in South Africa and Australia in particular.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ross from Just Move In. Really keen to hear about your experiences with the M&A process during both businesses, and whether you learned anything in particular during that process.
I would say, so one of the things I learned earlier is keep better data. I guess you run, we'd run the business sort of, fairly lightly. I mean, Simon and I have never done a business plan. In fact, we've never had a board meeting, but of course every day is almost like a board meeting, because you'd be chatting, discussing, making decisions, and then potentially changing them the next day. You learn certain things that you'd overlooked in a due diligence process about sort of, keeping data and maybe having some domain names in your own name and the likes. You need to be a bit tidier on that sort of stuff. I don't think there was anything, hugely surprising in going through the process. I found these companies, much larger companies, good to deal with and honest, and good people that you want to do business with. I never found that they would sort of necessarily backtrack on anything or anything like that. So I don't know. I'd say, just as you run the business, think a little. If you think that maybe an exit could one day be a possibility, you want to talk to some people and just do a little bit more on maybe keeping data in that sort of form that might be suitable. But I wouldn't go and run your business. Don't go and run your business for a sale. You should run your business for your customers, and every day spent on trying to gain more customers and do more business. That's the most important thing. You can sort out all these things at a later stage if you've been slightly untidy on some of your record keeping or the way you do your accounting.
Hi, Will from Rota speaking. What were the most difficult HR challenges you experienced as you grew?
I wouldn't say there were any particular ones. I mean, as a founder, one of your main tasks is, I think, is taking staff on your journey with you. And I think things like share option schemes are a very good way of doing that, because you align your interests with the staff, or vice versa. We did that from the beginning. It makes it much easier to persuade someone to go on an economy flight to Moscow and stay in a cheap hotel when they've got shares in the business. You tell them you want to spend the money on marketing rather than in a business class flight. So yeah, I think and I think you solve a lot of problems actually by aligning interests. Of course, you're still going to get some, some things that that crop up from a HR perspective. It's a constant battle for a CEO founder to keep staff engaged. You are going to find some people leave or try to leave, and then you've got a battle on your hands. And of course, you've got battles on your hands sometimes trying to hire people. And I think that's a skill, and you need to get your head into other people's heads and what's important for them to try and, So I've had some success and probably some failures in persuading people to stay, and then you've got to try and get them to look at things, in the way that I said. We had some dark moments, and my business partner would say, "Hey, no, look what we're doing." Well, sometimes you've got to do that with staff because they need to buy into what you're creating, and if people buy into what you're creating and you are creating, you're much less likely to lose staff because they see the value in what you're doing. Everyone wants to be part of a successful journey, and if they've got share options in the business, there's a financial incentive as well. So I hope that answers the question to some extent.
So my name is Christoph Wittig from Hornet Networks. I wanted to ask you earlier, you mentioned, or Adrian mentioned that there's a certain, maybe a density for network businesses to succeed. I mean, there's a tipping point when you have or enjoy increasing returns on adoption, whereas I think there will be markets where it's not conducive to enter because someone has already covered them. Did you have any form, when you enter those 10 countries, any form of analysis, what kind of a market share you would need, or when you would give up on entering it because you could not get to that tipping point that network effects will work your way rather than against you?
No, I'd say we did zero analysis. I think a lot of the way that we always ran the business was sort of just following our intuition, and it made more sense sometimes to go and do something than analyze it and let the market feedback, tell you how well you're doing and whether it's worth continuing or not. So New Zealand was a market that we found a lot harder. So there was a startup there that was doing a good job, and we found that obviously our growth was a lot slower there, but we found growth in South Africa a lot easier and Australia a lot easier. I wouldn't say that we ran the business very much like sort of management consultants or necessarily very analytically. We would just go and do stuff and test it. And I think still to this day, to me, testing stuff is a very good way of running a business, and just get out there and do it. You can spend too long analysing, but if you can test something and it doesn't cost you too much money, just go and test it. It's much better to go and, if you're looking at your various different potential drivers for growth, it's pretty dangerous to say, for example, to sit there saying, I don't think that PR would work for us. That's a pretty dangerous statement, because if you're wrong and someone comes in and they understand that growth driver better than you do, and you got that wrong, you can be in a lot of trouble. So I'd much rather someone say, we've tested PR, we spent £3,000 on it, and we don't think that it works very well for us for the following reasons. That's a much more powerful sort of place to be. And I know I've sort of moved on to growth factors rather than geographies. And there's nothing wrong with going analysing marketplaces and working out which ones you should be in. But for us, it was pretty natural to go to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, because we had such a large user base from those countries. And the country we went to after those three was Poland, simply because when we looked at our weblogs, we got a lot of traffic from people in Poland. Obviously, there was a lot of immigration at that stage from Poland into the UK, and that's why people were accessing the site from Poland. But when you've got users who know your brand, or even have users who know your brand and they have relatives back home, it can be a good driver. Certainly, when you're trying to do something with not a lot of money. So we got the competition in Poland was quite good, but we got good growth there, there as well. So I think sometimes it's almost just better to listen to your intuition and listen to your users, and and follow that than sometimes you get a bit too analytical.
I guess you analyze results based on tests rather than just a piece of paper, essentially. I think you talked a little bit about the monetization experiments you did early on, where you picked a particular segment and you tried it there, right?
Yeah, actually, certainly in Europe and some of the slightly more where we had less of a natural connection. So France, for example, I remember actually in Poland as well. Actually, initially we did spend, we'd get someone to spend 3 or 4 days writing up a report on what classified resources were available in that country for people to use. So we understood to some extent what the competition, what was available. I don't remember that doing a report like that ever sort of made us think we won't launch somewhere. But it was a nice, I don't know, I guess you launch somewhere. It's good to know what options are available to people. So we would certainly do some work on that. But we did all that in house. I remember hiring a Polish person in Poland, today 23-year-old guy, and said, "Can you do me a report?" And he wrote it in English, obviously, and we'd sort of write it up. And we ended up hiring him. He came to London and ran the business for us. We had two Polish people running the Polish business. So we were never overly analytical. But you're sort of your web log sometimes, and where your customers are from will give you a reasonable steer on where you should be going.
Great. Maybe a final one. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, Daniela from TwigD. I think what was interesting is when you said after 6 to 9 months you realised you didn't create enough value for your users and your customers. 3 years later, you decided that you did, and I was wondering if you did measure this, in what way you measured it. What was the thing that actually made you decide there's value created enough to start charging people, to start monetizing?
I'm afraid the answer is similar to the previous one. It was more one of of intuition. It's important running a business that you are in touch with your users, and there's various different ways of doing that. I mean, obviously there's incoming emails from your customers which will come in naturally, and you can learn some stuff from that, positive and negative. You should be out meeting your customers. I would certainly be out meeting employers, and you should have. I think intuitively you can get a feel for, whether you're creating value for people. I mean, ironically, the more they make a fuss when you say you're going to put a charge on, the probably more chance there is that it's successful. Because actually, if you weren't offering value and you said, "We think you put a charge on," well, why would they bother sort of replying in the first place? So actually, the people who were more adamant about that we would never pay were probably our best payers. So again, we always would just follow our intuition on all our decisions, and they're a finger in the air. How much should we charge for a job? There was no right answer. Yes, you'd know that it would cost you a couple £100 to put a job advert in a newspaper. We settled on 19.95, and for no scientific reason why we chose that number. And I guess we probably thought if it was too high, we'd drop it later, and if it wasn't enough, we'd increase it. But I think at some stage you've just got to, particularly if you're sort of pioneering in a space, you just got to get out there and make decisions and do them. And you'll make some mistakes, and you can reverse those mistakes. But again, you can probably overanalyze what the correct answer should be.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. This was fascinating, and I think it's the first time you're actually talking about the GumTree history in kind of that much detail.
Yeah,
so I
certainly.
really appreciate it, and we're honoured to
Thank you for having me.
have had you. Thank you.